Last week I made a video of this car, this 1991 Mercedes-Benz 420 SEL W126 body style, in which I took you guys on a tour of the vehicle, discussed some of the features of it, some of the unique features, as well as made another video shortly after that describing some of the maintenance tips you can perform on these cars, some of the gotchas, some of the more common problems. And one of the things that I mentioned in that video was the right rear passenger side window no longer functions. It rolled down one day and stayed down, and had kind of a unique failure. I was able to get it to roll back up and stay up for the majority of the time, but I really want to have all the windows working. So to recap, I'll go over what exactly the problem is. The motor works just fine and the regulator seems to work just fine, but look what happens when you try to roll it down. So it sounds like a regular power window. Actually, the regulator goes all the way down and stays down and sounds normal. But the glass only moved just a few millimeters. And now we'll go ahead and roll it back up. And you can hear that something caught right around there at the base of the glass and pushed it back up in the normal position in the channel. So kind of a unique failure. Most of the time when these things fail, it's either the window motor itself, specifically the brushes, and or it could be the window regulator also, stripped gears or snapped cables. But I won't really know until I get this door panel off of here. And to do that, I'm going to have to pop out this inner trim ring here, pop out the window switch, and then there's a screw back here for the grab handle portion of the armrest. And then I'm going to have to remove this screw here for the armrest, as well as that screw, and then some screws on the bottom of the door panel. And then I'll have to come along here and remove the reveal molding screws, and then finally the door latch trim ring, this nice solid metal door latch trim ring. And then once that happens, these door panels are actually hung on, not clipped on. This door panel should just lift up, tilt forward slightly, and come on out. And I also have to remove the door lock handle as well too. So let me go ahead and get this door panel off and start to make you guys part of the repair process, kind of take you along the step-by-step procedure that I'm going to do to try to see what went wrong inside of here and see if I can fix this without spending a whole lot of money on a new power window regulator or window motor. Okay, I got a little bit into this job, and little trick I do is I disconnect the door switch so the interior lights don't stay on for hours upon hours, and make little brown marks in the lenses and wear the battery out. So I just have to remember not to slam the door and smash that all up. You can kind of see just how thick the metal is on this car. That's generously thick. But anyway, I wanted to stop in the middle of the teardown procedure to show you something. I got the trim ring off around the door handle, and I was able to pull this assembly out a little bit. And what I found when I took the switch out is this. The plug is only on there about maybe 10% of the way. That's definitely not how Mercedes did it. So that tells me that this has been gotten into before, especially when you see all the scratches. And you can kind of see some of the witness marks right there where somebody got a little bit too overzealous with a screwdriver and made some marks along the tan colored trim here. But this is one of the reasons I like doing jobs myself, instead of taking them somewhere, is stuff like that. That plug is apt to fall off due to vibration at any minute, and even under the best of circumstances, the exposed connectors on the switch are much more readily corrodable now because they're not being protected and covered by the plug. So anyway, now that I have all of this disassembled, I'm going to go ahead and pull this out, take out that screw right behind this pad here to get the grab handle off, and carry on with the removal. I just wanted to show you guys real quick a good reason to do stuff yourself. Now I've got the door panel completely removed, and this car is kind of unique from the American cars from the standpoint of the removal process. It doesn't use the door panel clips like in a lot of the older American cars, so there's no need to go around the perimeter with a screwdriver and try to pop off clips. They just have these hooks on here. So once you remove all the obstructions and remove the screws, you also have clips up here toward the top. This entire panel just lifts right on up and out. So it's a really good design, and actually a pretty heavy panel. It's got some mass to it. And then of course we have the window switch I wanted to show you, where you can see the two colors on the contacts where the exposed surfaces have started to corrode because the plug was not put back on there properly. Definitely not the way Mercedes would have done that. And so my earlier suspicion that somebody's been into this door panel before has been confirmed, because I see some black electrical tape along the bottom surface here to secure the vapor barrier. So I know somebody's been in here before, there's no question about that, and that leads me to believe that this is a fairly common failure on these cars, or at least on this particular car. This is, has failed once before. So that actually gives me a good feeling, because I can probably do the same repair that they did whenever whoever it was worked on the car initially. And I've not had this vapor barrier off yet. It's still secured with the electrical tape along the bottom, so I still don't know why the window is acting like it is. And I'm just kind of taking you guys through this step by step. It's still secured up here, and I'm going to put the camera down in a few minutes and get this lifted up, and I'll put the switch back in, and we'll see for the very first time what's been going on inside there, and hopefully it's going to be a simple repair. Okay, now that I've got the vapor barrier pushed back partially, or at least pushed back as far as I need to get into the access panel, let's go ahead and actuate our switch and see what's going on for the very first time. And that's interesting. This definitely looks like it's broken away from the base of the window, and this does not look like an OEM mounting arrangement. This looks like something somebody has jerry-rigged or done a field repair on. So what I need to do is figure out what the other end of this thing looks like. I need to get up in there and manually lower that window and see the two mating surfaces and see how that thing was originally supposed to work. So let me get that window slid down carefully without breaking it. Now that I've got the window down a little bit closer to where I can see it, you guys can clearly see what happened. And this may be OEM actually, with the exception of both of these bolts. So it looks like that little plastic receiver in the window base fits into the head of this bolt here. And what likely happened is this, as the bolt was a little bit loose, it worked around inside there and gradually split this thing apart. You can see some of the evidence of the destruction there over the years. I'm not really sure how long it's been like that, but you can definitely see some metal debris and stuff like that in there. So that was starting to fail over a long period of time until it finally just broke in two. And I'm not going to be able to fix this with or jury rig this with anything I have here at the house. I'm going to try to see if I can find a just this one plastic piece here and just replace that. The regulator itself is working just fine. And look how lucky I was, because what ended up stopping that window from falling down was the fact that that bolt was all the way in. So I'm lucky that the actual mechanism is okay. Stops against that bumper. And I think all I might have to do is just replace that and put everything back together and hopefully have it last another 21 years and 170,000 miles. And I've pretty much got to stop what I'm doing here and find a part for that, which means I'll have to drive the car around for a while with the door panel off, get all the bits over on a nice protective bag so I don't lose any of the parts, and I'll upload this video all at once, unlike the Cannondale video which I started to make but have a hard time finding all the parts for it. I'll do this all in one shot and pick up this video when I get that replacement part. And I just wanted to say something about the trim pieces that I took off. I didn't know this, but even the door trim on this car is actually metal. That's really impressive. I thought that was all plastic, and a lot of today's newer cars is plastic, but there's a lot of metal on this car, except for the trim piece there, but that's impressive. That's not going to warp over the years and fade and all that kind of stuff. So that's a nice observation. But anyway, let me get to sourcing that part. Maybe the local dealer up here has it, and continue on with the repair. Well, I was able to find the correct part. The dealer happened to have just one left, and the new part is on the left and the old part's on the right, and you can see how much wider that is. And this further confirms my suspicion when you look at the new part more closely, and you can see how it's supposed to be fastened. There is no screw or bolt or anything like that. What you're supposed to do is thread this through the regulator arm and then kind of peen that down to kind of mushroom the end of that to kind of act as sort of a rivet. And I actually took the new part apart to see how this thing works. And what you got in here, this little metal piece, is a very smooth bearing surface that's going to ride along this plastic piece in there. This thing actually is going to rotate as the window goes up and down, as well as this is going to slide back and forth through the channel. And interestingly, you've also got these rubber pieces here, these hard rubber pieces. So when this thing slides up and down the channel and bears the weight of the window under compression, it kind of reinforces that plastic and makes it stronger. So, you know, you see how smooth that piece is, and then you contrast that to this repair here, where you just have a nut and bolt arrangement going through this regulator arm, and you can see that rough surface of a screw. It's just a regular, you know, bolt with threads on there. That's not surprising it didn't last all that long. That's a very rough surface as far as acting as a bearing surface, and wore that plastic piece right out, and sort of created some carnage there as well too. So the whole thing just self-destructed, basically because of a quick repair. They didn't want to get the correct part. They didn't want to go through the trouble of doing the repair properly. And what's going to happen now is this regulator is going to have to come out. It's going to have to take these 3 bolts off, as well as the wiring harness up in there. I'm going to have to get this this whole regulator assembly out, take out this arrangement there, stick the new plastic piece on, and then kind of peen that fastener on down so I have a good solid fit to repair this properly. So kind of interesting. This is the time to do the job right. So let me get that regulator out and go from there. Okay, now I've got the regulator and window motor assembly completely removed without too much violence. It was a little bit tricky. One trick is you have to loosen the upper window guide bolt and completely remove the lower window guide bolt. And I don't know if you can see on there too good. There's the window channel guide, and you slide that thing forward like that, up, and that'll give you enough clearance to get the motor out there, which we have sitting right here. And one disappointing thing that I ran into, and I don't know if you guys can tell, there is no plug, electrical plug, on this motor, making it very tricky to get out. I thought that this was actually a plug, but it didn't want to come off too well, so I think that's actually permanently attached. I didn't want to do any damage to it. So in order to avoid cutting up that original wire harness and creating a situation where you might have corrosion with like a butt connector or something like that, I went ahead and disassembled the hard shell connector on the power window switch. And then over there, see more clearly, wrote down the color-coded wires so I don't get everything reversed when I go to put everything back together. So getting that apart was a little bit tricky without damaging anything, but better to spend the extra time doing that and have the original wiring put back in place than to cut that wiring in half and have to solder and heat shrink tube and or use butt connectors and all that sort of crazy stuff. I went ahead and got rid of this fix right here, this nut and bolt assembly, got rid of all that nonsense. You can see how rough that surface is, how eaten out it is. And you can also see some evidence of grinding when the people that fixed this ground down that original part. And so now what I'm going to do is I've got the original part here disassembled, and there's a good reason for that. And I'm going to lubricate inside there between the plastic and the metal piece, and then this is going to go together like that. And what I'm going to have to do is pound on that with a hammer, or maybe even use a vise, and kind of mushroom out that surface so that it sort of acts like a rivet and connects these two pieces together. And I have it disassembled because the back of it's actually plastic, and I want to see if I can use a socket or something like that on this metal piece here, so when I pound on it I don't end up ruining this plastic piece and have to buy a new part again. So let me figure out a good way to do that, and hopefully I can show you guys the completed part. Then we'll go back in the car. Okay, I'm all set up here with my first attempt. I'm not sure if this is going to work. I got the regulator sitting on one of my toolboxes for support, so I can have both hands to use. And I got the end and the vise here, and the plastic piece installed, and a socket to take some of the pressure on the other side and keep this plastic away from the force. And then I got a big cheater pipe on there, because I know this is going to be hard to do. And hopefully I'm not going to end up torquing this vise right off the wooden workbench there. It's just cheap particle board, so I'm hoping the whole thing doesn't just crack off and fly off and hit me in the face. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and try this approach first, which may not work. But I wanted to kind of start small and work my way up, because with this method I've got a lot more control with the applied force there. I could do a much better job if I can get away with it. If this doesn't work, I'll just have to use a bigger hammer, literally, and just kind of peen that thing so I can mushroom that end hard up against the end of the regulator there. So pretty soon you guys are going to see the result of this odd looking contraption. Well, the socket and vise idea didn't work, and I'm glad I checked on it before I got too far along with it. As you can see, at the end of it's actually starting to push through where that surface is no longer, get out here in the light, that surface is no longer flat. It's starting to push through the opening of the socket there. So I'm going to have to come up with a different way of getting that thing fastened on the regulator arm. And let me think about that for a while, and I'll show you guys what I end up doing. Okay, here's the finished product and the solution I came up with. I've got a bolt inverted, pretty big bolt that has a nice flat surface, and then a wider surface on the bottom to take the pressure. And so I got the head of that little rivet thing sitting on that. And then what I ended up doing is I can't show you because I have just one hand at the moment, and it's already finished anyway. But I had one hand applying downward force like that to keep things still, and then with the other hand I just peened it. I just started giving her shit. And what you end up with by doing that is you sort of mushroom that head out a little bit, so there's zero clearance now. You don't want to pound on it too hard. You just want to pound on it enough to where you have no play in there and it's nice and solid. There is a little bit of damage from the earlier attempt at the vise, where that started to come through the hole of the socket where the nut would usually go in the socket. But that's not too bad. That's just cosmetic. That's not going to cause any performance problems at all. I got some lithium grease all up in there on that bearing surface, so this ought to last a good long while. And I kind of like keeping these videos real. You know, I could have edited out the part of the failure with the vise and all that kind of stuff, but this is real stuff. And you know, if you try one thing and that doesn't work, if that turns out to be a bad idea, you adapt and innovate, and you try some different ideas until you get it. So now what I'm going to do is put this piece back together with all the other components, and then I'm going to go ahead and bench test this. I'm starting to see, I'm noticing that I've got a little bit of some wear right there. I'm going to check out and see what that's all about, and see if I can do something about that while I've got this thing out here in the open like this. I like to test everything before I go back in the car with it, just especially with something as difficult to remove as this, and because of the wear that I've seen on this gear right here. And sure enough, it's got a hell of a squeak. I'm gonna go ahead and run this motor and let you guys hear. I'm gonna get up real close to it to make the sound a little bit better. So it's, let me reverse these wires to roll the window back down. It's got a squeak toward the bottom end actually. So this will be simulating the window going down. Just unacceptable. A lot of wear going on in there, so I'm going to see if I can clean all that dried grease up off of there, clean up this surface. This is kind of looks like a scored brake rotor, and see if I can address that squeaking issue. A car like that shouldn't have any squeaks and rattles. And you can see down in there, it's got these nylon bushings in there to keep the gear perfectly aligned with the gear on the motor. So that's what that's for, and there's one on each side. So I'm going to lubricate this whole thing and see if I can get that to sound better, see if I can get that to sound like it should before I go back in with it. Okay, now I've got everything all greased up, got everything cleaned up and well lubricated and along the gears, courtesy of Smitty Pig. Actually, what's in here is a very special synthetic moly fortified grease that I got from work one day. That's why it's in this container. Very good stuff. So let's go ahead and test this thing and see how quiet it is now. Very quiet. Didn't hear any squeaks at all. Let me go ahead and reverse the connections and go back down with it. Go the other way. Very nice. Nice and quiet. So this thing is now ready to go back in the car and finish this job up. By the way, here's what this piece looks like all put together now. You've got those two rubber things in there like we talked about before. So when it's under compression, it's with the glass, it's reinforced. So this is basically successfully reconditioned now. So back in the car it goes. Okay, the regulator's back in the car now, and I got the little plastic piece properly repaired and attached to the regulator arm, and the groove in here where the plastic piece rides, I've got that all cleaned out and well lubricated with the same grease that I used on the gear. And before I get too far along hooking all the wiring back up on that hard shell connector, I've got everything broken out here to this battery, and I just want to go ahead and do a couple of dry runs to make sure that everything's working just like it should before I put everything back together. So now we're going to roll the window up. Alright, that sounded good, nice and quiet. I'll reverse the connections so I can roll it back down. See if I can show you guys. Perfect. No noise, no nothing. So now I'm just going to have to go ahead and put these connectors back up, hook the switch back up, and put the door panel back on and finish this job. And one thing I want to do while I've got everything apart like this is these cars have what they call door check straps, and to keep the door, like with light pressure, I can't close the door, so it kind of keeps the door open. Door check strap is right there. You got of course a upper hinge and a lower hinge down there, but these door check straps often need lubrication. Inside of there's a little spring-loaded ball that rides along here, and it hits a detent and pops up and keeps the door from closing, and that grease gets all dried up over time. And this door does sound kind of dry, so I'm going to go ahead and lubricate all up in there. And while I got it apart, lubricate those areas of the lock mechanism that aren't really easily accessible just with routine maintenance. and then I'll put everything back together and hopefully she'll run like new. So now we have everything back together, just like it was when I started the video, and we'll give her a little test. Went ahead and cleaned the glass from my greasy hands, that way the dew wipes don't get contaminated with grease. And I cleaned up the door panel and got rid of some of the grease smudges. And wood is still nice and intact and no scratches after the repair. And let's see if this thing works now and see how quiet it is. Nice. Very smooth and very quiet. So there you have it, guys. That's how you would do a power window motor repair on a 1991 Mercedes 420 SEL W126. At least in this particular case, I got rid of the offending items, the foreign bodies, this band-aid repair that somebody did, and went ahead and repaired it properly. So now I can enjoy a fully functional power window in this door again. So I hope this video has helped out some of you guys that might want to have a go at repairing power windows in your Mercedes.